Hello and welcome to REGO-FIX Tech Chat. My name is David McHenry. I am the Engineering and Technical Manager here at REGO-FIX USA. In past episodes, we've covered things like proper nut torque, how to install pull studs, and proper tool depth. But we thought in this episode, let's put it all together. So what we want to do is we're going to move over to the workbench and we're going to go through each of these really quickly and not just with REGO-FIX products. So now we are over at our workbench and we are at our torque block, and I have a different nut and collet system set up over here. But what I want to go over is the proper way to assemble the collet and nut. Now, if you've watched our previous videos, we always talk about you have to snap the collet into the nut. And that holds true for all collet series, especially the ones that are high performance. Now, there are some like this old TG system where I can physically thread the nut over top of the collet and it will snap in, but this really isn't a high performance system. But let's go over proper assembly anyway. You should take your collet and you should always snap it into the nut so that it's retained before you put it into the tool holder for assembly. Now that I have the collet and nut onto this tool holder, well, let's talk about the wrench that should be used with it. Now, with this system, you can see that the grooves on the side are really just pockets. That means it's made for a hook wrench. Now, a hook wrench has a little hook on the end that fits into the detent. What's really important when you have to use a hook wrench on any type of assembly is, one, what's the condition of the hook wrench? If the hook is worn, it's going to slip off, and bad things can happen when you're trying to apply 100 foot-pounds to anything and you slip off. So you need to definitely take a look and make sure the hook is not worn, and make sure you have the correct size. As you can see, two different sizes I have here. They have different radiuses on those so they will fit the nut properly. So make sure you have the correct size before you go through and put it on to tighten your assembly. So really important with the hook wrench, get the right size. Here we have another tool holding system. It is another long collet type system with a nut. Again, proper assembly is making sure the collet snaps properly into the nut before you go through and put your collet and nut assembly into the tool holder. Now, just like we did in the last tool holder, this one also uses a hook wrench. So the same thing holds true here. Take a look at the hook wrench, make sure it's not worn, and make sure you have the correct size. By this time, you are very familiar with the ER system and its proper assembly. But let's go over that one more time. If you're using a REGO-FIX high Q nut, there will be a dimple. Take your collet, lay it over the dimple, and it snaps in and is retained. Now you take this assembly and go to your tool holder for proper assembly. Now, the REGO-FIX type of nut, or the ER type, does not use a hook wrench. It actually uses what's called a spanner wrench, which has multiple teeth for engagement. But just like the hook wrench, you need to look at those teeth occasionally and make sure they aren't worn. A worn wrench is prone to slip and can actually damage the nut. So make sure you take a look at your ER spanner wrenches during your assemblies. As with any collet system, making sure you have the proper torque for the nut that's on that system is very, very important. So definitely go to the manufacturer of your choice for the system you are using, take a look, find the different torque charts that they may have for their products, and make sure you follow those. Now, it's easy to do with a torque wrench or something as simple as a torque block. Another very common mistake that we see that happens quite frequently is, well, not having enough tool engagement. Now, we've covered this in other tech chats, but what basically is happening is I'm taking the tool and I'm pulling it up to a point that I don't have enough in the collet itself. Now, with an ER tool holder, that's 2/3 the bore length is your minimum engagement. So always make sure you have that, and check your other collet series, because you can see, collets like this are very long they might require a little bit more inside of them than you do for an ER assembly. What we typically see happens is I have an assembly like this. This happens to be a 1/2" tool, and I need more projection. So I pull it out to get about where I need. Well, how much is inside there? I really don't know. So I end up putting my wrench on this and over torquing it because I'm kind of scared that it's going to slip. So we actually marked this tool. So this is actually a little line here, shows where the minimum engagement would be, and I'm considerably past that. So in a case like this, well, I'm probably going to request that you get a longer cutting tool. As with any system that you have in your shop, cleaning is very, very important. So when you go through and you change tools, just popping the nut loose and pulling out the cutting tool and putting another tool in, well, that's not best practices. You really need to make sure that you take everything apart and clean every part of the assembly. Remember, you are trying to hold microns. One of the last things that normally goes into any assembly, well, that's your pull stud. Definitely make sure you look up the proper torque rating for the different taper sizes that you have. You can find that in the REGO-FIX catalog. As you can see, proper assembly is very important to make sure that you get the most out of your tool holding systems. If you have any questions at all about proper nut torque, pull stud, tool depth, or maybe even a system that REGO-FIX doesn't offer, feel free to reach out to your REGO-FIX technical team. We are here to answer your questions.